Hello and welcome to Outside Xbox. We're here on Tomb Raider launch day in Croft Manor.
Yep.
Or is it Croft Manor?
Jimmy'd the window and we
yeah.
got in.
Does she even have a manor anymore?
I don't know. Actually, that's one of the many things we'll be discussing
yes.
today. We're going to be talking about
Tomb Raider, but with all the spoilers. So
yeah, don't watch if you haven't finished Tomb Raider because we're probably going to be spoiling things. But there's a few things that we wanted to talk about in the new Tomb Raider, which is quite an interesting game for a Tomb Raider game, which are usually these kind of high adventure Uncharted style. I mean, Uncharted is Tomb Raider style.
It predates Uncharted, yes.
This one feels just a lot more like a horror game, right? That was the experience you had.
Yeah, I think it definitely. If it's not out to give a survival horror vibe, it definitely stumbles on it exactly by accident. I think it's to the same end as a survival horror would use these same elements, which is to make you frightened for the character who's your proxy, so to make you nervous and to convince you of how much peril Lara is in. And what we're talking about here are the extremely gruesome death animations.
Yeah, it's really kind of Dead Space level of horror in the some of the death animations. I mean, there's throat cutting, there's impalements, it's hard to watch a lot of the time.
Yeah, I would go so far as to say they're more affecting, more upsetting than those in Dead Space, which you can quite closely compare them to, because she's not got a spacesuit on.
Yeah, she feels
and
more
you can
vulnerable.
see her expression, which is pretty nasty.
And she's usually struggling to free herself from something, or
when she gets impaled up under the chin and she's alive for a few seconds, split second.
Yeah.
I think it's clear what they're trying to do with that, and it is upsetting and it is effective. And I don't want to say it feels out of place, because I think that's definitely what they're going for. But it's interesting that it's an action adventure with really a strong flavour of survival horror.
Yeah, and I mean, this is interesting because recently I think Cliff Bleszinski said that you couldn't release a AAA horror game anymore because
not by that name.
No one would buy it, right? But whereas this, I think, is a AAA horror game, and I think it's probably going to sell pretty well. I think, but
it has got the Tomb Raider name.
Yeah,
I mean,
people might not be expecting the game that they're going to get. Is what I'm.
Yeah, I think what's interesting as well, because there's so much of the grisliness is in the death animations, which are obviously optional in that if you don't die you won't see them. Everything else is, I mean, she gets battered and she gets like put through the mill, but in a sort of Indiana Jones, like, I fell on my spine again kind of way. If you manage somehow to play the game without ever dying, you wouldn't get any of that. Although you did mention there is the sort of charnel house type scene.
Yeah, I mean, later on there's
bloody corpse parts everywhere.
Heads, and at one point you literally fall into a lake of blood. And
which is exactly that shot from The Descent, right? Where she kind of rises out of the bloody pool. I
mean, it becomes less as you go through the game, but particularly from the start, it feels very much like that kind of survival horror where you're being pursued by something. Those guys at the start who are chasing you through the tunnels and the rocks are collapsing. It's less an Indiana Jones thing and more of The Descent thing, which is kind of proper claustrophobic horror. At least that's what I felt. You're going along, the water's here, you've got a torch, and you're like looking back, checking for people chasing you. It was, for me, that was more horror than action adventure.
On a tangent, I thought briefly at the beginning that they might set up two different factions of islanders, because the guy who is initially like kind of the shaggy bearded guy who is trying to capture you in those very first few minutes, he almost sounds like he's going like, oh, no, come back, I'm trying to help you. Let go, and I thought he might have been a good islander, and then there's a faction of bad islanders, which is not, spoiler again, this is not how it turns out.
Okay, so as the game progressed, Lara she goes through all this stuff and she becomes a strong character by the end who can take care of herself. Do you find that a convincing journey?
Yeah, sure, why not? I mean, I don't know what it's like to be on an island like that. I might come out of it a strong survivor, but yeah, I guess I wouldn't have minded a little more. No, I guess actually it wouldn't have worked. Like a sort of Nathan Drake wisecracking sort of, come on, give me a break. That sort of stuff probably wouldn't have meshed with the tone they actually went for. I don't know, convincing, yeah, sure, I can see what they were getting at.
But then, I mean, it takes a supernatural turn towards the end as well,
which you totally saw coming, right?
Yeah.
In the old like Tomb Raider vein and in the Uncharted vein, you know, for someone who hasn't played any of the early Tomb Raiders, you would totally call that. Actually, what I wanted to say was I thought what was interesting is the way the game ends with a survivor is born. Is that they've definitely drawn this like survivor. You know, they've distilled Lara's like most important strengths into survivor, which is actually quite. It's like the biggest remodeling of the Lara Croft character, in that if you played the original Tomb Raider and nothing else, you wouldn't be like, that's a survivor character. You'd be like, that's a posh archaeologist character. So it's a total rebranding of Lara, I think. So that's all from the drawing room here in Croft Manor, and we'll see you next time for more on Outside Xbox.
Bye.
Bye.
Should probably get out of here, but the alarms go off.
Right.